One of the very few key subjects in this world that allows us to break through the old paradigms and to recreate a new and much better worldview and a much more mature world.
Looking out into the vastness of the universe, the greatest mystery is right here, right under our feet. The ultimate aim of all science, to penetrate the unknown. These are the stories that will make you say, what the fuck?
WTF, Gary? WTF? What the fuck does WTF mean? What the fuck? Oh.
Over the years, I've collected a lot of strange stories from people. People write to me all the time. And what has become clear to me is the level of absolute bizarre strangeness that so many people live in that they share with nobody. Nobody. But they share it with me frequently. And I've collected a lot of these stories. One of them, I'll just throw out a hint. This is men and women. This is a woman who had a child that should never have existed. She should never have become pregnant. Something very bizarre happened. She'd had sightings and encounters, bizarre encounters her whole life. Men in black following her. Just because they're more technologically advanced than us does not mean that they're necessarily more ethical. They may not be. There could be interstellar economic hitmen out there, but there could be people who do care. And I suspect that we've got different groups because just based on the apparent types of interactions people are having, they do vary. And that would fit. That would fit that you've got different agendas afoot. So I would say it's probably complex, and I sure would like to have an accurate scorecard of all the players. Are they the descendants of the Anunnaki? Are they simply the proteges of the current banksters who run the world today? Are they reptilians, shape-shifting reptilians like David Icke talks about? Whatever they are, there's always been a very small group of people who don't give a shit about the rest of humanity. And they don't care. So that's always been the case. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is that this is just one. This is one microcosm. There are people who are supposed to give birth to certain types of children. I believe this now. And there's an agenda. And I'm trying to figure this out. But I've come across a number of these cases. This is getting close to maybe like what some abduction researchers have been looking at, you know, alien agenda, hybrids and so forth. But there's something different. This is not the same thing. There's an agenda in which non-humans, I believe, are seeding certain human females with I can't believe I'm saying this, with the babies that they're supposed to have. And this process is being monitored by covert, clandestine human groups. And I know this is true. So it's a matter of putting together enough research to put this together and turn it into a substantial piece of research. Yeah, if you want, I mean, what's the most amazing thing? That's one of the most amazing stories. And honestly, I've just tossed a little tidbit out. It's a matter of really putting this together and formalizing it. There are a few other researchers that I deal with who are deeply, deeply into the weird, you know, as I call it. And I may do a book with one of them, or I may just do it on my own. But it's almost as if there's this meta intelligence, this grand intelligence that's managing us, you know. And I mean, I'm just wondering out loud, but is it a case where they almost play us like a video game? You know, they'll say, oh, I've got Leslie for the next 5 years. What are we going to do with her? Oh, we'll have her meet that person and have her do this and this and this. Oh, yeah, and I've got Dolan, and we'll have them do an interview on such and such a date. And, you know, is that how it is? And I sometimes wonder, you know, what is our conception of space and time after all? Well, our common sense tells us one thing, that space just goes, time just goes. But we know, right, that space and time are kind of like this. But in our ordinary reality, we're kind of going through. But is there an intelligence that knows how to manage all of that and is running this? I've given up the idea of trying to put my own controls over what I think is actually possible on the other side of that fence. I think a lot of things are possible. You know, we're kept into a tiny little reality box. This is what our reality is supposed to be. In my 20 years of researching this subject, one thing that I've learned is that every time I think that I've broken through to the other side, to a new reality, there's another veil there, and I just keep tearing away veils. It has not stopped yet. I mean, it's just so much. You know, back 20 years ago, it was almost comical how conservative my attitude was. 20 years ago, I wanted to know one thing only. I did not even want to know were UFOs real. All I wanted to, or aliens, or were there crop circles. I didn't care about any of that. I wanted one question, which was this a phenomenon that my country's military cared about? That's it. And if they cared about it, why was it not in any history book that I ever studied? That was it. Well, I determined very quickly that yes, this was a thing they sure as hell did care about. And why wasn't it in the history book? So I had to, you keep going. And then that just leads to more questions and more questions. So every time you tear away the illusions, you tear away the lie, you're in a new, better place, but then you realize, oh, I'm really not out of it yet. And it's been 20 years of doing this. I think that we're dealing with a very complex interaction. Like I said, in the 1950s, it was just like men, and almost maybe one or two women, but men from another planet in spaceships. What we're dealing with is vastly more complex, and it's not all physical. There's something very, very important and profound and complex, and the experiences, I also agree with you, are very diverse, from deeply traumatic, where people do not know how to process what they've gone through, and this is so important, to very transformative experiences where people have gone through this incredible process, which may have been painful as well, but they come out of it in a very positive way, because that's what spiritual growth is. You have to tear away illusions. So yes, I feel that this interaction that people are having, it's the core for humanity of what this is all about, because we're dealing with this in a very intense way, and it is causing change in the population. People are going through changes in their thought processes. Some of it is seemingly very physical, some of it is seemingly very non-physical. And what exactly all that means, I haven't figured it out. What I really believe is that this phenomenon is we're right at the edge of our understanding when we're dealing with it. And it's there and it's a little bit beyond, and we are really struggling to understand. When I spoke of the woman with the baby, that she shouldn't have had the baby, this is someone who's a brilliant individual and has had lifelong experiences. And I can tell you, she was just telling me recently, she doesn't understand to this day. Just because you've gone through it doesn't mean that you really get it all. We're encountering this. We know that there's something important there. I don't know how much time we have. I'm happy to chat as long as you like, but I know Michael's coming on. I do feel that I want to talk a little bit about the politics of this, because that's what drew me in to begin with. And I think the politics are very, very important, because what's happened is that the secrecy on this subject, years ago I thought, well, it's obviously real, so how do they keep the secret? And I've spent the last 20 years trying to figure this out. The secret has become international, just like power has. It's become privatized, it's become international, and it has subverted, deeply subverted, the political systems of most nations in the world, in particular that of my country, the United States, where the secrecy, I think, that is the heart of the UFO secret, is in the U.S. black budget structure, which has become privatized, which has become dominated by private money, and buried within our black budget special access programs. And it's destroyed my country's system, which was once a great, beautiful system that was ideally, government of the people. And what's happened is it's been subverted. So that when people wonder, well, why does UFOs matter? Well, one reason it matters is because it's literally destroyed the American government, and that matters for everybody around the world. When you turn the United States into an empire that does not answer to the people in any way, that's important. And the UFO cover-up is part of the reason that's happened. I have often felt it's a great paradox. I still feel that way. I think it's impossible, but it is inevitable. And impossible in the sense that our political leaders have no incentive ever, or not even the political leaders, the secret keepers themselves who stand behind the political system have no incentive for giving this secret up. They have too much to lose. But it'll happen nonetheless. We're in an utterly revolutionary transition period of our own civilization. All you have to do is look at the last 20 years, look ahead to the next 20 years. It's obvious. It's obvious something is going to give. I don't believe that we'll ever truly be ready for disclosure, but that will not stop it from happening. Who's ever ready to have their first child? Nobody. You have it anyway. We will have disclosure. It will be forced upon the political leaders, and it'll be a big mess. My own feeling is it'll be messy. It'll be unpleasant in many ways. Anytime you have any kind of growth, whether it's personal spiritual growth or political growth in the society, that means you shed illusions, you shed lies. And that's a difficult process. And we'll have to go through that process. There's really no way around it. There are many, many billions of people in this world who are attached to a certain paradigm, a certain way of picturing the world. And disclosure will shatter that. It'll just get discarded. So it'll be difficult. But the alternative is being spoon-fed lies the rest of your life. And how long can humanity do this? So I think we're at a point where the question that I have asked myself is, what will be the trigger? It could be a leak, it could be a WikiLeaks type of event. It could be a mass sighting, which now with new technologies we're capturing things more and more. It could be something totally unexpected that we can't even predict because our society is changing so dramatically. But I think something will force us open. And it'll be probably filled with cultural wars, maybe a bit of a mess, but that does not mean it won't be something much, much positive coming out on the other side, which I do believe. I'm an optimist in that regard. I think that we're not going to fall off a cliff and go back to sticks and stones. I think that we'll continue. I think we'll have a better, and I think we can create a more just society. It has to be based on truth, not lies. And the biggest reality, as I see it, is the presence of these other intelligences that are here on Earth, interacting with humanity in some very important way that we need to understand. This is why I believe disclosure, as one historian said, will come as a terrible, swift sword. And when it does, there'll be a lot of hell to pay. That'll be a good thing. It has to be done. There's no way around it. The system has become rotten to the core. And the end of UFO secrecy will open up a whole can of worms dealing with a whole bunch of other secret things, whether it's 9/11, chemtrails, underground bases, you name it. It'll all come out. And it needs to come. The reality that we're living in, this officially sanctioned reality, is, I think anyone can realize it's a fiction. It's a fiction. And I think what's happening is that we are going through a period of cultural change, and it's taken time. If you go back to the 1950s when all of this was kind of new culturally to people, I think it would have been a great, great shock to understand just how strange this phenomenon is. Back in the 50s, people thought, oh, men from another planet in metal spaceships landing, and I think it's a lot more complicated than that. All right, they're not just coming here for the first time, take me to your leader. That's not how it's going down. And so it takes generations for true, deep ideological change, conceptual change to take place. That's really what you need. You need generations upon generations. I think that we are right on the cusp of transforming ourselves as a species. I don't know if it's for the better or not, to be honest with you. Are we trying to turn ourselves into super intelligent robots? Sometimes I think that's what I see. Genetic manipulation, people afraid to die, so they want to live forever. I think it's a bad idea. Probably putting nanochips inside ourselves, and within 50 years, will there even be good old-fashioned unenhanced Homo sapiens? There's a question. Will we be in a transhumanist type of environment fully even then? I have a hope and I have a fear. And I don't like hope or fear. I actually try to live without both of them, but I have a hope and a fear. My fear is that we'll have a global fascist totalitarian state that is complete genetic control over all people and customizes different types of human beings. Some brilliant, some not so brilliant, some different physical characteristics, all to fit the little pegs to fit in all those slots that they want. That to me would be the worst nightmare ever possible, but it is possible. My hope is that we actually don't try to turn ourselves into superhuman robots, that we actually try to find a way to live natural, organic, untoxified lives, a natural human lifespan. I don't think there's anything wrong with living only a century, personally, and in which we simply try to be as much in touch with ourselves and what we're supposed to be biologically as we can be. And that includes our spiritual side, which I happen to take very seriously. I think that we have a spiritual side and it matters. By trying to turn ourselves into superhuman robots, my fear is that we're really losing sight of what we're really supposed to be. Really what it ultimately comes down to is how we, human beings, comport ourselves in this world of ours, with or without other beings. And I think if we act the way we're supposed to act, the way that if we treat each other with loving kindness, with compassion, not aggression, I think that we will get to a point where we will be able to interact with a much larger community in a positive way. First time ever, ordinary people around the world are able to communicate with each other. We're able to share knowledge. We're able to organize in ways that were never, ever possible. Even one generation ago would have been a fantasy. And it's not a fantasy now. So we're in an era now where you can rip digital data out of classified vaults and throw them out for the world to see for the first time. And we're only at the beginning of that. So everything's different now. Everything is totally different now. And I do really feel this in my bones, that we are right on the cusp of a massive, massive transformation, an upheaval. And as I was saying to start this conversation off, I'm not saying it's all going to be pleasant, but it's going to have to be necessary. And you know, I pray to God or whoever's out there listening that we do everything we can to make it positive.
Who's that?
Oh, don't worry about him. That's just a nobody who lives in the basement.
A nobody? Who farted? Nobody!
What the fuck?
The UFO phenomenon, I'm convinced, is one of the very few key subjects in this world that allows us to break through the old paradigms and to recreate a new and much better worldview and a much more mature world.
Looking out into the vastness of the universe, the greatest mystery is right here, right under our feet. The ultimate aim of all science, to penetrate the unknown. These are the stories that will make you say, what the fuck?
WTF, Gary. WTF. What the fuck does WTF mean? What the fuck? Oh.
Over the years, I've collected a lot of strange stories from people. People write to me all the time. And what has become clear to me is the level of absolute bizarre strangeness that so many people live in that they share with nobody. Nobody. But they share it with me frequently. And I've collected a lot of these stories. One of them, I'll just throw out a hint. This is men and women. This is a woman who had a child that should never have existed. She should never have become pregnant. Something very bizarre happened. She'd had sightings and encounters, bizarre encounters her whole life. Men in black following her. Just because they're more technologically advanced than us does not mean that they're necessarily more ethical. They may not be. There could be interstellar economic hitmen out there, but there could be people who do care. And I suspect that we've got different groups, because just based on the apparent types of interactions people are having, they do vary. And that would fit. That would fit that you've got different agendas afoot. So I would say it's probably complex, and I sure would like to have an accurate scorecard of all the players. Are they the descendants of the Anunnaki? Are they simply the proteges of the current banksters who run the world today? Are they reptilians, shape-shifting reptilians like David Icke talks about? Whatever they are, there's always been a very small group of people who don't give a shit about the rest of humanity. And they don't care.